Lovely. So yeah, like you said, I'm Kathryn. I've recently joined the training team at Oxfordshire Mind. I'm really passionate about workplace wellbeing and how we can look after ourselves and others whilst we're at work. Obviously, especially considering the amount of time that we will be spending at work throughout our lives. Just a brief introduction into Oxfordshire Mind. So we support over 30,000 people a year who are experiencing mental health difficulties through a range of services across the county. As a training team, we help to raise awareness of mental health across businesses throughout Oxfordshire, again, through a range of different training courses. And what's great is that the funds that come through those trainings, the training that we deliver, are then put back into our services to help more people across Oxfordshire who need us. Obviously, it's changed a lot recently with all of our courses now being online. So this afternoon, I'll be talking to you about some ideas just to help you maintain some good well-being as we continue to work from home, things that you can do for yourself or share with others. So as we just, before we get started, if we just share the definition of well-being, I know we will have heard a few different definitions through the course of the day, but I'd just like to share briefly the World Health Organization definition. So they say good well-being is defined as being able to be comfortable, healthy and happy, achieving your potential. So not about comparing yourself to anyone else, but it's about what you see as your potential. It's having that ability to cope with normal stresses of life. So stress will happen and we will have ups and downs as we go through our lives. But if we have good well-being, we're better able to cope with that. Well-being is also defined as being able to be productive. So that's not only in work, but also home life, and the ability to make a contribution to your community. So what are the effects of workplace well-being on working from home on our workplace well-being? So the last few months have been a catalyst that's accelerated the time it's taken us to embrace the benefits of working from home. So for example, we've not had to have any commutes. I haven't had to cycle in the rain if I don't want to, which has been great. We can save time and money whilst working from home, and we can work more flexibly and with much more autonomy. Having said that, working from home can affect our mental well-being. Working from home can feel more intense than working in the office, with work and play overlapping in the same physical space. Our living space becomes our workspace. So, for example, if we have to take a difficult call and it's happened in our living area rather than a workplace that we can usually leave at the end of the day, which makes it much harder for us to switch off. It can also be really stressful and feel quite isolating when we can't see our colleagues as we usually would, and can lead to a feeling of low self-worth if we feel like we're failing or not adapting to working from home effectively. On top of this, there's lots of anxiety around health and keeping safe at this time, which also have an impact on our well-being at the moment. The fact is, we might be in this position for a while. We might be working from home, working remotely for a while longer. So through this talk, I just wanted to give you some practical ideas into how to make this work for you and for your team, just to help you keep well moving forward. And what I go through probably won't be anything new to you, but just trying to use this as a reminder to get back into good habits that you might have started earlier on in the lockdown, just to maintain your well-being. So firstly, just a note about stress, and the definition of well-being, we talked about that normal stress, and our brain doesn't like uncertainty. So if you do feel stressed, it isn't just you, it's just our brain reacting to that uncertainty that's going on around us. You can be reassured that it's completely normal if you're feeling stressed or unsettled due to COVID and the restrictions around it. However, as the current situation does continue, we do need to be aware that stress can cause mental health difficulties, especially if that stress is prolonged and quite intense, and it can impact on existing mental health difficulties too. Shortly, if it works, hopefully you'll be able to hear a snippet from a podcast that was recorded by Ian Robertson, who's a neuroscientist and clinical psychologist, talking about his definition of stress. So let's see if this works.
Stress is a perception.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perception that the demands made on you exceed your ability to cope with them, and the resulting emotion is anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether you experience that anxiety, whether you experience that not very pleasant emotion, depends on your outlook and your, how you perceive the situation.
So if you heard that there, Ian explained about stress, and it's whether you experience those feelings of anxiety that are caused by stress actually depend on your outlook and the actions that you take. So bearing this in mind, we can take action that could enable us to cope better with this stress and with the changing world that is around us, and enable us to keep mentally well. So the simple practical ideas and of actions that you might be able to take that I'll discuss today will relate to two things. So one is setting a good routine for yourself, and two is using separation activities to differentiate your work and home life. Really, really important as we're working from home. So regular routines are essential for our self-confidence and sense of purpose. Our brains like routines, so try to find something that works for you. Separation activities are activities that tell your brain that it's time to work or time to relax. Differentiating home and work is really important whilst working from home. And as I said earlier, working from home can feel much more intense. So this could be a really great way to reduce that intensity and allow us to relax after our working day is complete. So one example of this might be to get dressed just before work and get changed straight after work, just to mark that the start and the end of the day really clearly to yourself and others. So I heard Anne Worrell's talk earlier, who spoke and highlighted the importance of what we're wearing as getting into the right mindset. So this is a really good example of that. And remember, embedding these activities, these kinds of separation activities into your routine really helps others in the household as well to differentiate your work and home too. So for example, when you've packed all your work things away and gone for your after work walk, that's a really clear sign to everyone else in the household that you've finished work for the day, and now it's time to relax or spend time with others. And remember, by doing this, you're really creating a great example for other colleagues or children in your household. Putting some of these simple habits in place will allow them to see you prioritising your well-being, setting a great example for them to do the same. So something that could really help us to set a great routine could be a good routine and be used as a separation activity, in fact, is exercise and keeping moving, keeping active. So this doesn't have to be anything necessarily strenuous. It's just something to get us moving, release those endorphins, those feel-good hormones, even if it's just a 10-minute walk around the block or some gardening. I've been doing Joe Wick's HIIT workouts over the last few months, which I've used to set my morning routine. Maybe some of you might have been doing that too. And what I love is that he really focuses on the importance of exercise on your mental health as a motivator to do the exercise. So it's about how you feel after the workout rather than how you look. And physical activity, like I say, could also be used as that separation activity. I actually recently spoke to someone who gets ready for work, gets changed, then he goes for a short walk near his house so that when he comes back through the door into his home, that's when his working day begins. And this action just tells his brain it's work time, really just almost simulates that commute to the office and gets you into the mentality to start work when you arrive back home. Again, moving around during the day could also help you to avoid that screen fatigue that a lot of us will be experiencing sitting in front of the laptop, probably more than usual. So doing your work doesn't necessarily mean that you need to sit in front of the screen all day. So remember, we can still be thinking and planning whilst we're out for a walk or walking around the house. It'll just give us our eyes a chance to just have a rest from the screen just for a few minutes, and just stops us becoming chair-shaped, really. Next, have a think about your working space. So managing this effectively could be really useful for separating that work and home life and keeping mentally well. I liked how in an earlier talk, Professor Simonetta Manfredi described the importance of this as it was kind of as if the office is coming into our home, and those physical and psychological borders between them have been permeated. So this can impact on our mental health, as work is kind of always on our minds whilst we're at home, and potential home life difficulties or stresses are then always on our minds when we're working too. However, we are the ones that are in control of these borders. So I'm just going to share a few ideas that might be able to help in relation to your working space. So first things first, as tempting as it might be, try not to work from your bed and do get up and dress. When working from home, it's more important than ever to have that space that's purely for sleep and relaxation. Also, try to have a dedicated room to work in and try to make it as attractive as you can. This can really help you focus and get into that working mindset in the morning. Now, I definitely appreciate that as having a designated room to work in might not be accessible to everyone. For example, if you live in a one-bedroom flat, or maybe there are multiple people working from home at one time. And if this is the case, maybe try to create just a corner of a room that's allocated to your working, or find your own way to differentiate between your working space and your home. Alternatively, you might actually prefer to move around during the day. So you might stand in the kitchen to send emails, you might walk around the house for phone calls, or sit at the desk then to write your reports. Just try different ways of working and really see what suits you. One of my colleagues sits on the sofa when they're having informal chats and phone calls and team calls with colleagues, and then moves to the desk for those more formal conversations and meetings later. So it's thinking when we're in an office, we'd move around the office space and the meeting rooms depending on what kind of a meeting we're having. So again, try and simulate this at home. And a really important note on working space is do make sure that you're able to work comfortably. So talk to your manager or HR if there are barriers to doing this. Just last tip on space actually is at the end of the day, what I do is hide my work things in a designated space. So I put all my things in a bag and hide it in the wardrobe. One of my colleagues actually puts a blanket over theirs, their items. And again, she's someone who works in a one-bedroom flat, so doesn't have as much space to be completely having a room designated to that work. So again, doing this and hiding our work items just can help us switch off, as we then aren't getting constant reminders of when we see our laptop or phone just sat there. Leading on from this, do make sure that you do switch off and allow your brains just to have those breaks during that downtime. Switch off your work phone when you're not working. As tempting as it can be to kind of keep an eye on your work phone and emails, try not to. Your brain will need a break and a rest overnight to be able to be more effective the next day. So know when to switch off and really try to stick to this. Now, I appreciate that for some of us, it won't be as simple as switching on at 9 a.m. and switching off at 5 p.m. For example, those with children, time might be needed to take out of the day to spend time with them, and then you might actually choose to work later on into the evening. I've actually recently got a very energetic puppy, which means that I'm taking more breaks in the day than I usually would, but then starting work a little bit earlier and finishing a little bit later just to compensate. So the important point though is to schedule some time into your evening or your morning, just so that you can have some time to relax and some time to yourself. Again, when we're working from home, it can also be really tempting to skip breaks. And I loved Darren's talk earlier. He mentioned having lunch al desco. So again, I think a lot of people are getting tempted to do this as well and not having a proper break from the screen to take their lunch. Sometimes when we are working from home, we don't feel like we can have that 5 minutes to take a break or step away from the computer. However, when we do take that break, it'll help us feel and stay much more energized. We need to be extra disciplined and aware of this when we're working from home. And if it helps, you could actually schedule in these brain breaks into your work calendar. So not only you, but even others know that you're going to be stepping away for a few minutes just to have a break. And remember, because just think, in the office, we would actually be having those natural brain breaks when maybe we're walking from one room to another, or just having a chat with a colleague by the kettle whilst you're making a drink. So just try to look for ways to simulate this when you're in your own home. Something that's actually been raised by our training participants over the last few months is that some people are actually using what used to be their commuting time as extra time to do work. But remember, actually, this is extra time for us to do what we want to do. So why not use that time to maybe read a book, spend time with family, listen to interesting podcasts, take some time out for you. That's what it's really all about. And if you feel guilty about doing any of this, remember, we have the right as workers to be happy and healthy at work. we are allowed to switch off, and it will improve our well-being and thus improve our productivity later. As I said earlier, what I'm talking to you about today isn't rocket science, and you might actually be going along and noticing that some of these things you're doing already, but you might also be noticing gaps in what you're doing, and think of areas that you might want to work on moving forward to maintain your well-being. Or maybe you've even picked up some ideas that maybe you wouldn't use, but other people might do, so you might be able to pass on to them to help them out too. This leads on to my next piece of advice, which is stay connected. Stay connected with your colleagues and your friends. Connecting is really good for our mental health. It gives us that sense of belonging and feeling of being valued and accepted. By having these positive connections, we really create that network of people to turn to when we are experiencing difficult times in our work or home lives, which helps us move forward from those negative experiences more easily. So try to keep in touch with your colleagues as much as possible. Maybe you could set aside time to have non-work conversations with your team, or others you haven't seen a while who maybe you would have bumped into for a conversation by the kettle when you were in the office, or even have those impromptu check-ins with your colleagues, just like you would when you'd pop your head over the desk in the office. Be a bit spontaneous about it. Within our team, we actually have regular team meetings, so just half an hour, a couple of times a week, just to talk about something other than work. Sometimes we might incorporate a little quiz or a round of dingbats, or just share photos of walks we've been on recently. It just gives us a bit of an opportunity to just have a little bit of fun and talk about something other than work and check in on each other. One of my colleagues actually during those check-ins is usually on a lunchtime walk, as they're really an informal time, and they allow my colleague to get out and about during the day, and especially with us especially with it getting darker into the evenings, into kind of through autumn into winter, being flexible and getting out and about in the middle of the day, maybe rather than after work or in the evenings, will be really important moving forward. As an organisation, we have continued to do our tea at 3, which we used to do whilst we were in the office. So normally in our tea at 3 on a Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock, everyone would usually stop working for half an hour or so, gather around the kettle, and usually some baked goods would be involved as well. And the only rule is that we can't talk about work. And we've kept this going now, and although it's now virtual. We've also got a virtual wellbeing afternoon every few months. That's for everyone who works at Oxfordshire Mind. So basically a huge Teams call with 100+ people signed on. So far we've done Ready Steady Cook, we've done a Guess the Baby, we've done some quizzes. Another colleague held a session of chair yoga. So we've just been doing little things just to have a bit of fun and allow us to see the faces of our colleagues that we haven't seen in person for several months. Getting to know our colleagues really allows us to better notice if they're acting differently and might be struggling. So staying connected with them really gives that opportunity to provide support where we can and make sure that we can look after our colleagues too. Just a few other ideas that I quite liked that I've come up in training that we've done over the last few months. Some ideas from our training participants. So one participant actually shared an idea of a phone picnic. So this involved, she decided she needed a bit of a break from the screens, like a lot of us do at the moment. And what she did, she got her friends together in their respective living areas. Everyone made themselves a little picnic and put their phones on speaker next to them. And they had just a catch up over the phone without having to look at any screens. And I thought that was a really nice idea, still getting to know, still getting that time to catch up with each other, but without having to stare at a screen and do Zoom meetings and things like that. Another participant, to again differentiate that work and home life balance and just make sure that they can stick to their routine, actually sets their alarm 15 minutes before the end of the working day. So that means that they then, at that point, they start logging off, tidying up, winding down, so then they can actually switch off when they plan to, meaning that they can finish there and start their home time at that point. Another training participant, at the end of every week, they actually write down and think of their achievements and positives that have happened in the week previously and before they switch off for the weekend. And I've actually started doing that myself since they told me about that. So at the end of every working week, you end it on a positive note. And when you're doing that little activity just for a couple of minutes at the end of, on a Friday afternoon, it's a sign that the weekend has begun. Again, it's those things like those separation activities that I talked about earlier, really getting your mindset from work to home and vice versa. So proactively embedding some of these habits and some of these separation activities into your day-to-day routine will really enhance your ability to adapt to these changes as we continue, and will really help to be able to promote positive well-being for yourselves and others. So just two last things before I finish. Firstly, if you are struggling or if you are feeling low, do talk to a friend or your line manager or a colleague. You can also call Oxfordshire Mind's information line to find out a little bit more about what services are available to you across the county, not only as in our charity, but charities and organisations across Oxfordshire. There's lots of support out there. I actually volunteered on the information line before I started working for Oxfordshire Mind, and really think it's a great source of information if you're experiencing mental health difficulties, or if you know someone who is. I almost see it as that front door to the services where you can find out how we can support you and how others can support you too. And remember, these aren't normal times, so it might be actually that not possible to apply those normal work practices or have that kind of normal output that we normally do. So remember just to take it easy on yourselves. If any of these routines or habits or activities that I've mentioned that you might take up, if they go out of the window and you end up spending your day in pajamas or working from the sofa all day or feeling stressed and unproductive, please don't be too hard on yourself. It's a very, very strange time. And let's just acknowledge that we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together, and we will pull through this. Now, this has obviously been a bit of a whistle-stop tour about working well from home. If you are interested in our workplace wellbeing training or know anyone else who might be, here's just a few of the other online courses that we're offering at the moment at Oxfordshire Mind. We have a range from our 1 hour 5 ways to wellbeing workshops to our more kind of time-intensive mental health first aid, where you can become a qualified mental health first aider. And in celebration of World Mental Health Day coming up shortly, we're actually offering 10% off our 5 ways to wellbeing workshops throughout October. So this would be a really great addition to maybe your virtual team away day, or maybe a relevant team building activity that you incorporate into your team's calendar. There's lots of information on our website and social media, so feel free to get in touch with us as well if you do want any information. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you've picked up a few ideas to help you keep mentally well as we move forward. I hope you enjoyed the closing sessions and stay safe, healthy and happy. Keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. I really appreciate that. Great presentation. Are you keeping well?
Yeah, I'm keeping well, thank you. Well, ups and downs as everyone, but generally well, yes, thank you.
Well, pass on our best wishes to the rest of the team. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Take care.